Can I be real with you for a moment? There are some seasons where it feels like heaven went quiet, where you're praying, crying, fasting, believing, and all you get back is silence. And in that silence, the enemy starts whispering you, did God forget you? Did you miss your moment? Is this all there is? But I came here to tell you today, just because God is silent doesn't mean he's absent. Just because it's delayed doesn't mean it's denied. Because what looks like silence is often God moving in stealth mode. He's setting things up, protecting you from what you can't see, preparing a promise that won't collapse under pressure. So tonight, we're not just talking about waiting. We're going to understand what it means to trust divine timing, to hold on to hope even when heaven is quiet. Because baby girl, when God finally answers, it won't just be on time. It'll be right on purpose. When we talk about the silence of God, it's not just about unanswered prayers or long nights where heaven seems far away. It's about that deep ache in your soul when you've done everything you know to do. Fasted, prayed, obeyed, and cried, worshiped, and still the only thing you receive is stillness. It can feel personal. It can feel like rejection. But I need to understand that silence is not absence. It's strategy. God doesn't waste words. When he speaks, things move. Worlds are created. Dead things rise. Chains fall. So when he's silent, it's not because he's doing nothing. It's because he's doing something so profound, so deeply layered that words wouldn't even capture it yet. You see, we've gotten so used to needing constant reassurance, constant validation, constant noise that we forget sometimes God works best in quiet places. Think about seeds in the ground. Before they ever break through the soil, something powerful is happening beneath the surface. Roots are stretching. Foundations are forming. That process quiet. That process is unseen. But without it, the fruit never comes. So when God is silent, he's not ignoring you. He's grounding you. He's building something within you that's strong enough to hold the weight of the blessing you've been praying for. And strategy doesn't announce itself in advance. It moves in silence so the enemy can't track it. It's in the quiet seasons where your discernment sharpens, where your dependence on God deepens, where your spiritual muscles are strengthened not by what you feel, but by what you know, that he is still God even when he's not talking. Sometimes goes silent to teach us how to walk by faith, not by signs, because faith isn't built in the noise. It's proven in the silence. You want to know who really trusts God? Look at the ones who keep showing up, keep believing, keep obeying when they hear nothing back. That's not weakness. That's warrior faith. That's the kind of faith that says, even if I can't trace his hand, I'll trust his heart. Because you know that silence is not abandonment. It's alignment. It's God bringing things together that you didn't even know needed to be fixed. We live in a world that's addicted to instant answers, but divine timing doesn't work on demand. God is not your assistant. He is your author. And sometimes the silence is him writing your next chapter with care. He's editing what you thought you needed, removing characters who can't go with you, preparing scenes that you would have rushed through if he gave you what you asked for too soon. You asked for the promise, but he wants you to have the wet capacity to carry it. And so he takes his time. He stays silent, not to punish you, but to prepare you, not to confuse you, but to consecrate you. And here's the thing. If God spoke too soon, you might move too fast. You might grab onto something premature and call it a blessing when it was really just a distraction. His silence is tragic because it forces you to sit still long enough for your flesh to get quiet. It silences the noise around you so that when he does speak, you can hear him clearly, without all the competing voices, without your own fears interrupting. It's strategic because what he's about to release in your life requires a level of focus and clarity that can only be birthed in the silence. Even Jesus experienced silence. Hanging on the cross, bloodied, beaten, forsaken, he cried out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" But the Father didn't answer. Not with a voice, not with thunder, not with a sign. Silence. Yet through that silence, salvation was being secured. Through that silence, victory was unfolding. Through that silence, hell was being defeated. The silence wasn't the end. It was the setup. So don't misinterpret God's silence as disinterest. Don't assume that just because he's not talking, he's not moving. Some of God's greatest miracles begin in moments of silence. He's moving things behind the scenes, repositioning, redirecting, blocking attacks you'll never see, protecting promises you're not ready for yet. The silence is strategy. And if you can learn to embrace it rather than fear it, you'll come out of it with a faith that can't be shaken. You'll realize that what felt like abandonment was actually a battlefield, one where God was fighting for you in ways words couldn't explain. We live in a culture that equates delay with denial. The world tells you that if something hasn't happened yet, it probably won't. That if your breakthrough didn't come on your timeline, then maybe you missed it altogether. But heaven doesn't move on human schedules. Delay in the kingdom of God is often divine protection. It's not that God forgot you. It's that he's keeping you from walking into something that could crush you, distract you, or destroy what he's been building inside of you. There are some doors you've been praying for that didn't open because saw what was on the other side. There are some people you wanted in your life that walked away. Not because you weren't enough, but because God knew they weren't safe for where you're headed. You saw an opportunity. God saw a trap. You saw a promotion. God saw a pit. And while you were grieving the delay, God was shielding you from something your eyes couldn't yet see. You were frustrated by the closed door, but God was celebrating that you didn't step through it and forfeit your destiny. God is not just interested in getting you to the promise. He's committed to preserving you along the way. That means he will delay what you want in order to protect what you need. You want the blessing, but he's after your becoming. You want the spotlight, but he's focused on your stability. Because a platform without preparation is dangerous. A gift without grounding becomes a curse. And so he delays, not to punish you, but to protect the version of you he's developing. If God gave you everything you asked for the moment you prayed, you'd never know what it means to trust him. You'd never learn how to rest in him. You'd never find out what it means to wait well. And sometimes the waiting is the real miracle, because in that space between the asking and the answer, he's breaking your need to control. He's teaching you how to surrender. He's showing you how to praise even when the door is still shut. Divine protection doesn't always look like angel armies or parted seas. Sometimes it looks like unanswered emails, delayed approvals, missed calls, broken engagements, or plans that suddenly fall through. It doesn't feel good, but it is good because God sees the whole picture. You seize the movement. He knows how one, yes, too soon could derail the purpose he's planted in you. He knows that your destiny requires discipline, that the promise has a weight to it. And if he lets you carry it too early, it might break you. Some of the greatest gifts God ever gave you were the things he didn't let you have. You didn't know it at the time. You cried, you questioned, you doubted. But now looking back, you can see that the delay was mercy. The detour was deliverance. The silence was shelter. Because sometimes God's not yet is a louder, I love you, than a quick yes ever could be. When God delays, it's because he's orchestrating something that requires timing. Not just your readiness, but the alignment of other people, other places, and other pieces that you don't even know are connected to your purpose. He's preparing heart-shifting atmospheres, softening stubborn spirits. And if he moved before the full alignment, you'd step into something that looked like destiny, but lacked the power to sustain it. It's easy to see delay as a dead end, but what if it's really a divine detour? What if the season you're in is not punishment, but positioning? What if God is using the delay to train your ears to hear him more clearly, your heart to follow him more fully, and your spirit to depend on him more deeply? Because when you come out of a delayed season, you don't just walk to blessing. You walk into it knowing how to carry it without losing your identity in it. And here's the truth. Everything that's from God comes with process. David was anointing as a teenager, but he didn't take the throne until years later. Joseph had a dream, but he had to go through a pit and a prison before the palace. Jesus was the Son of God, but even he waited until the appointed time to begin his ministry. Delay was part of divine plan, not a detour from it. So when it feels like everything is taking too long, when doors keep closing, when it seems like everyone else is moving ahead while you're stuck in the same place. Remember, delay doesn't mean God has forgotten. It means he's forming, shaping, pruning, and preparing you for something that isn't just good. It's God ordained. God's timing is not just about dates on a calendar or clocks ticking down to your moment. It's about your transformation. It's about who are becoming while you wait. You see, we all think that divine timing is about when the promise shows up. But in heaven's perspective, divine timing is about when you show up. The real you, the healed you, the whole you, the version of that can carry the weight of the promise without compromising your soul in the process. God's timing doesn't revolve around your deadline. It revolves around your development. There are seasons where God delays the breakthrough not because it isn't ready, but because you're not ready. Not in a condemning way, but in a protective way. He loves you too much to let you step into something that will outgrow you before you're mature enough to manage it. He withholds not to frustrate you, but to fortify you. Because the door you're praying for might be very place where the enemy tries to meet if you rush into it unprepared. The promise has pressure, and pressure reveals what preparation hides. So God takes his time. He takes his time building your character, refining your motives, healing your wounds, teaching you obedience, not so you'll be perfect, but so you'll be anchored when the blessing finally shows up. Divine timing works on both ends. While God is preparing the thing for you, he's also preparing you for the thing. That preparation doesn't always feel spiritual. Sometimes it looks like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like learning to say no. Sometimes it looks like facing what you've been running from. That's still part of the process. Because when God decides it's time, he won't have you enter a room just to get crushed by what you didn't deal with in private. He wants you to thrive, not just survive. And that means the process has to touch the hidden places, the pride, the insecurity, the fear of rejection, the need for approval. All of it has to be surrendered if you want to step into divine timing fully aligned. We often say we're waiting on God, but the truth is, many times, God is waiting on us to mature, waiting on us to let go of what's familiar, waiting on us to stop trying to manipulate the outcome. You can't microwave maturity. You can't rush spiritual growth. God is not in a hurry with your destiny because he's eternal. He sees the full picture, and he knows that premature promotion can be more dangerous than delay. He's not trying to get you to the finish line quickly. He's trying to make sure you don't fall apart when you get there. There are layers to your purpose, and each layer requires a deeper version of you. That's why some delays come right after a big step of obedience. Because just when you think you're ready, God shows you a part of yourself that still needs healing. Not because you're disqualified, but because you're in process. Divine timing is less about arrival and more about alignment. When your whole will and your character align with God's spirit, you won't just enter the promise. You'll be able to sustain it, protect it, and steward it well. Transformation during the waiting season isn't always visible to other people. They might see you as stuck, delayed, overlooked. But what they can't see is that God is building endurance in your spirit. He's giving you discernment. He's teaching you how to recognize his voice above all others. Because when the door opens, you won't have time to pause and wonder if it's him. You'll already know. And you'll walk through that door with clarity and confidence. Not because it was easy, but because the waiting made you ready. It's in the waiting that your worship becomes deeper. Your faith becomes pure. Your motives become cleaner. Because when you've waited on something and watched God refine you in the process, you no longer want it just for your ego. You want it because it brings him glory. You want it because it's part of his plan. That kind of transformation shifts everything. It turns ambition into purpose. It turns striving into surrender. And that's when you know you're getting close. Not because the clock says so, but because your spirit is no longer rushing the process. You've stopped chasing timing and started trusting transformation. Faith isn't proven on the mountaintop. It's forged in the valley. It's easy to believe when everything is falling into place, when prayers are being answered, when doors are opening without effort. But the real test of faith is in the silence, in the stillness, in the spaces where heaven feels quiet and your soul feels restless. It's in those moments where you're doing all the right things. Praying, serving, sowing, and staying obedient, and still nothing seems to be shifting. That's where real faith grows. Not in the firework moments, but in the quiet ones. The ones that feel mundane, disappointing, even lonely. Faith grows strongest in quiet seasons because it's there that we learn to walk by what we know, not by what we feel. When God is quiet, your emotions will try to fill the gap. Fear will tell you that you've been forgotten. Doubt will whisper that maybe it's your fault. Insecurity will start rehearsing all the reasons why it might never happen for you. But in those quiet seasons, faith becomes a choice. A daily, sometimes hurly, decision to believe God's word over your feelings, to trust his character over your circumstances, to lean on what he already said when he's not saying anything new. That's mature faith. That's refined faith. That's faith that has been through some things. Quiet seasons strip away all the external validation we're used to leaning on, the applause, the affirmation, the signs, the confirmation. When all of that is quiet, you're left with you, God and his promises. And that's where intimacy is born. That's where you stop performing for people and start anchoring yourself in purpose. That's where you learn to find strength in the secret place. You discover that his presence doesn't need a microphone, a spotlight, or a stage. Sometimes his presence shows up in a whisper, a breath, a quiet reminder that he's still there, even when you can't trace him. It's in the quiet that your roots grow deeper. Think about a tree. The deeper the roots, the stronger the tree. But roots don't grow in noise. They grow underground in dark, silent places. No one sees the roots, but the roots are what sustain the tree in the storm. And that's exactly what God is doing in your quiet season. He's growing your roots. He's building spiritual depth so that when the storm comes, and it will come, you won't be shaken. You won't break because your foundation wasn't built in hype. It was built in hiddenness. The quiet season also reveals where our faith has been placed. Sometimes we think our faith is in God, but really it's in outcomes. It's in timelines. It's in specific expectations we've placed on how and when God should move. And when those expectations aren't met, our faith feels shaken. But the quiet season invites us to let go of our idols, to release the plans we created for ourselves, and return to the truth that faith is not about controlling outcomes. It's about surrendering them. It's about saying, even if I don't see it yet, I still believe. Even if I don't feel it, I still trust. In those seasons where everything feels slow and stagnant, God is doing his deepest work. He's teaching you endurance. He's giving you resilience. He's stretching your capacity to hope in the dark. Because faith that's only active when everything's easy isn't faith. It's convenience. But faith that chooses to show up in the silence, that chooses to worship when the room is still, that refuses to quit even when the road feels endless. That's the kind of faith that moves heaven. That's the kind of faith that unlocks miracles. There's a kind of peace you only learn in the quiet, a kind of strength you only discover when everything else goes still. It's the peace that passes understanding, the kind that shows up when logic fails and emotions waver. It's a quiet confidence that comes not from knowing how things will turn out, but from knowing who holds your future. You walk different when you've been through a quiet season with God. You pray with more authority. You love with more depth. You serve with more humility because you've learned that faith isn't just about believing for the big things. It's about staying faithful in the little things, even when no one's watching. Quiet seasons humble us. They remind us that we are not in control. They strip away self-reliance and push us deeper into God dependence. They break us open so that God can pour something new inside. They silence the noise so that we can finally hear what really matters. They hurt sometimes, but they heal us in ways that loud seasons never could. We live in a world that loves clarity, certainty, and quick answers. We want immediate responses, visible signs, and instant confirmation that what we're believing for is on its way. But with God, the journey doesn't always come wrapped in reassurance. Sometimes his most powerful answers begin with a simple, not yet. And when you don't understand that, not yet, doesn't mean no. It can feel like rejection when it's actually redirection. It can feel like denial when it's really a delay that's full of divine intention. God's not yet is not a closed door. It's often a whisper that something greater is still being prepared behind the scenes. There are promises you've prayed for that haven't manifested yet, not because God changed his mind, because he's still aligning all the pieces. You're thinking it's a no, but God is simply saying the timing isn't right. You see one side of the story, but God sees every moving part, the people, the timing, the place, the impact, the consequences. His not yet is full of mercy, full of grace, and full of wisdom. It's not about punishing you or teasing you with delay. It's about protecting the purpose he's placed on your life. Because when it finally does happen, it won't just bless you. It will bless everyone connected to you. When you hear not yet, it challenges your patience, but more than that, it tests your trust. Can you trust God when his timeline disagrees with yours? Can you trust him when the calendar keeps flipping and the promise still hasn't arrived? Can you believe him when it looks like nothing's changing, and yet deep down, something in your spirit says, keep going? That tension between waiting and believing is where your faith is stretched and strengthened. It's where your roots go deeper and your confidence and becomes unshakable, not because of what he's done, but because of who he is. Sometimes God withholds to purify your motives. That yet, not yet, allows you to confront why you want what you want. Are you chasing the blessing or the one who blesses? Are you seeking the gift or growing in the character to carry it? A rushed yes could feed your ego, but a delayed yet matures your soul. It breaks down entitlement. It crushes comparison. It teaches you to stay in your own lane and trust that what's yours won't miss you, and what misses you was never meant for you. When heaven says not yet, it's easy to compare your season to someone else's. You see people stepping into blessings, opportunities, relationships, and favor, and you wonder why your story still feels like it's on pause. But someone else's, yes, doesn't cancel your not yet. Their season doesn't disrupt your timeline. What God is doing in your life is so tailor-made, so specifically designed for your journey that it cannot be rushed or copied. You're not behind. You're being refined. You're not forgotten. You're being formed. In every not yet, God is inviting you to stay faithful in the in-between, to keep showing up even when the harvest hasn't come, to keep praying even when the answer hasn't been revealed, to keep believing even when you feel stretched thin, because your obedience during the not yet is building something inside of you that you'll need when the Ives finally arrives. The waiting room is never wasted. It's where warriors are trained. It's where discernment is sharpened. It's where the real version of you, the spiritually grounded, emotionally mature, purpose-filled version is cultivated. God's not yet is often an invitation into deeper intimacy. It's a moment to lean into his presence instead of pushing for his promises. It's an opportunity to trust his silence and anchor yourself in his goodness. There is something powerful about learning how to worship while you wait, how to praise when you're not yet positioned, how to give when you haven't yet received. That kind of faith isn't flashy, but it's fire tested. It doesn't crumble under pressure because it wasn't built on what God does. It was built on who he is. The enemy loves to twist not yet into never. He loves to turn divine pauses into seeds of doubt. He wants you to walk away in frustration right before the breakthrough comes. But what if the not yet is really just proof that God is still writing the story, that he's not finished, that he's still working on the masterpiece of your life, and every delay is part of the design? You don't have to understand the delay to trust the designer. You don't have to feel progress to know purpose is unfolding. Because when God finally says, yes, it will be better than anything you tried to force on your own. Obedience in the silence is one of the most powerful acts of faith a believer can offer. It's one thing to obey when the instructions are clear, when the blessings are visible, when the next step is obvious. But when heaven is quiet and there are no signs, no confirmations, and no affirmations, obedience becomes a weapon. It becomes the evidence that you trust God's character more than your circumstances. It becomes the declaration that even when you can't hear him, You still believe he's working, still move leading. Obedience in silence isn't passive, it's spiritual warfare. It's what keeps the door open for divine appointments. It's what unlocks the doors that can't be opened by effort, strategy, or intellect. In the silence, God watches your response. Not because he's trying to test you like some distant teacher, but because he's developing you. He wants to see if you will still move forward without applause, still say yes without the guarantee of reward, still show up when there's no spotlight. The silence is where true servants are shaped. It strips away the performance. It peels back the layers of religious routine. It reveals the core of your commitment. Do you trust the promise, or were you only in it for the feeling? Are you after his heart or just chasing his hand? When you obey in silence, you align yourself with heaven's pace. You're no longer moved by the urgency of the world. You don't need constant evidence or immediate fruit to believe that something is growing. You become rooted, grounded, consistent. You start walking in a rhythm that is set by God, not by fear, not by pressure, not by public opinion. That kind of obedience creates stability. It builds trust between you and God. Because every time you say yes with no explanation, you give him room to show you who he really is. Your provider, your protector, your sustainer. There's something sacred about silent seasons. They require you to tune out the noise, the opinions, the distractions. They force you to listen deeper. Not with your ears, but with your spirit. When you keep obeying in the quiet, your spiritual senses sharpen. You begin to discern God's voice even in the stillness. You begin to see his hand in places others overlook. Obedience becomes more than just what you do. It becomes who you are. You're not obeying for the outcome. You're obeying because you're aligned with his will. And that kind of obedience carries weight in the spirit. God often releases breakthrough at the intersection of obedience and silence. God, think about Abraham. God told him to leave everything he knew, his family, his comfort zone, and follow a promise he couldn't yet see. There were no details, no map, just a word, and Abraham moved. That kind of faith doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing God. It comes from a relationship so rooted in trust that even when the instruction doesn't make sense, your spirit says yes. It comes from learning how to surrender the need for certainty in exchange for divine alignment. When you obey in silence, you begin to carry authority. Not the kind that comes from titles or platforms, but the kind that comes from intimacy, from history with God, from walking with him long enough to know that even his silence is strategic. You begin to walk into rooms with a confidence that confuses the enemy because it's not based on what you see. It's based on what you know. And what you know is that obedience always produces fruit, even if it's delayed, even if it's invisible, even if it comes in a form you didn't expect. Obedience in silence also breaks cycles. It tells your flesh that your faith doesn't rely on feelings. It silences the voice of doubt that tries to convince you to give up. It shuts down fear before it has a chance to take root. It creates space for God to do what only he can do. Because there are some doors that only open when your heart is in full surrender. There are some assignments you can only step into when you've proven that your yes isn't conditional. And there are some battles that are only won by quiet, consistent obedience, by staying planted, staying faithful, staying focused. In the silence, you learn that faith isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. Sometimes faith just looks like showing up again, choosing the high road again, forgiving again, praying again, sowing again, believing again, even when no one sees it, even when nothing seems to be changing, because heaven sees and heaven honors obedience, the kind that comes from love, not pressure, the kind that's rooted in trust, not transaction, the kind that doesn't need a sign to keep moving.